So, when did you move to LA? I mean, like the last time I saw you, you were in New York because you tried to save my radio show at Air America, which I appreciate.
Yes. It was, that was my, I loved your show. And Air America was actually like 5 blocks from where I live, so.
Right, we felt like you lived at the station. It was exciting.
Yeah.
But it got to the point where it's like, Tim's here. Yeah, and you're always there.
I came for the pastries.
Yeah.
And it was always a pleasure to do your show. And I thought your show was right where Air America should be and continue to be and grow into. And unfortunately, they chose to move in a different direction.
Yeah, out.
Out.
Yeah, they chose to go ahead and let it die somehow.
Yeah.
I always associated you with New York, so you called me from here and you were in LA. When did that happen?
It happened 3 years ago.
Yeah?
Yeah, I moved to 3 years ago.
Was there a moment where you're like, I've had enough?
Yeah, well, you know, at the risk of offending New Yorkers, I lived there my whole life. I grew up in Greenwich Village in the 60s and 70s. I saw a lot of change happen in the 80s. I moved out here for the 80s. I moved back at 89 and raised my family there throughout the 90s and the aughts.
Right.
And just felt around 2000, 2002, 3, I had enough. And I just, you know, New York can be a beautiful friend, but it can also be very taxing. And I chose to stay there until my kids graduated high school.
But it must be sort of heartbreaking because it seems to me that if you grew up in that city when you did, you know, throughout the 60s and throughout the 70s, and having, your father was involved in the folk scene. Mm-hmm. It's almost like watching like something organic turn into this robotic, empty, miserable place.
Well,
I mean, because I lived there for years, and there was, you know, there was that point, and it's tricky because I couldn't romanticize it or have the same memories you do of, like, say, Times Square, even in the 70s, or the Village in the 60s. But, like, there was part of that thing where it's like people were like, oh, you can't change Times Square. It's supposed to be filthy and dangerous.
Yeah.
And now you go there, and you got to be careful because you're like, oh, wow, this is spectacular. And like, oh, no, I've been brainwashed. But there was something romantic and amazing, like, about growing up. I imagine it sort of defined you as a creative person and as what was possible. I mean, what were you seeing as a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old?
It set a hugely high standard for me. You know, when you go away for the first time, like when I went to college in upstate New York, I didn't realize that everyone didn't have the same upbringing as I did. And I felt like I was already 5 years ahead of everybody because I had to deal with so much. You know, when you're young and you're dealing with whether the guys down the street have knives or not, you know, you tend to learn survival skills that you might not learn in the suburbs. And at the same time, you're exposed to a tremendous amount of threat in various forms, like drugs, for example. And
Sure.
you know, when you see a junkie strung out in your neighborhood when you're 6 years old, you pretty much decide you're not going to do heroin.
Yeah.
You know, it's just not part of the glamorous life.
Dad, why is that guy sleeping standing up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was able to give those lessons to my kids because their school was near a methadone clinic, and and so I was able to say, you know, you see that guy? That's a methadone addict. You don't want to be that.
And it's really a New York experience because the clinics are there and people, they don't drive there, and obviously you don't want to drive on methadone, but you would see like literally 10 of them leaving the clinic thinking they were getting over on people, just kind of limping along and talking with that voice.
But see, there's a good and a bad to coming in and cleaning up a place. For example, Times Square, Disneyfied and bright and clean, and it's safe for tourists. And you know, there's like 2 or 3 porno places left.
Yeah.
But the bad thing was that those porno places went to every single neighborhood in Manhattan.
Sure.
So now in Greenwich Village, you've got 3, you know, XXX shops. And,
Sure.
And up in the Upper West Side, you got your. So it's not like it made it go away. It just put it into different areas of the city.
Well, now fortunately you can just get it on your computer. There's really no need to have those shops at all.
Pretty much your living room is your
that's your porno shop
right now.
now.
And it's free.
Yeah. Beyond the frightening elements of New York, when you were a kid. I don't want to read into your biography, but I assume that your father was a fairly popular, he was part of a popular folk group, right? Mm-hmm. So I have to assume that, when did you start acting?
I started acting in grade school in 7th grade, a play called The Boston O'Tooles. I was cast as St. Patrick, recast as St. Peter when the nun realized that the Irish kid was going to be better at playing St. Patrick because he had an Irish accent.
Right.
And it was about a family of people that die in a car crash and go to heaven. And that was my first play.
Uplifting Irish theater.
Yeah. And so I started acting in grade school, and then in high school I started actually directing plays, and I was acting in an off-Broadway troupe called Theater for the New City, which is a great group that's still alive today.
How old were you?
At the Theater for the New City, I was 12 years old when I started acting.
And what kind of stuff were they doing? I mean, 12 years old is young, so I imagine, I'm assuming that your mind must have been blown at some point.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, off Broadway in the 70s,
yeah.
That was a porno theater, no?
Well, sort of. Before I was allowed to act, I had to do some work in tech. So I wound up running Spotlight for a show called The Angels of Light. And if you've ever seen, there's a great documentary that came out a few years ago called The Cockettes. And it's about this group from San Francisco. It was a wonderful group, actually. They started doing midnight shows, and their whole milieu was 20s and 30s movie musicals. They would perform musical numbers from Nelson Eddy and Jeanette MacDonald, musicals, and they do it with glitter everywhere. And so you had these guys with huge long hair and beards filled with glitter and completely, wonderfully gay. And this was my first exposure to theater, was watching these guys do this amazing show.
Yeah.
And it was this guy named George Harris. And George Harris was now named, he grew up in New York City, he was an actor. His parents were actors, and he moved out to San Francisco after a trip to Washington, D.C. Now, you know this guy. He's the guy putting the flower into the end of the rifle at the Pentagon protest. He's got blonde hair.
Famous photograph. Yeah.
And so he moves out to San Francisco, grows his hair longer, grows a beard, and changes his name to Hibiscus. And Hibiscus and Jack were the leftovers from the Cockettes, and they started a thing called the Angels of Light when the Cockettes show bombed in New York. And so there was a lot of drugs, and there was a lot of free thinking and free expression. But the thing that was great about them, they were fierce.
Yeah.
They were motherfuckers. They did not put up with shit, and they were brilliant at what they did.
And you were 12.
And I was 12 watching this. Now George Harris's sister,
Yeah.
Eloise,
Yeah.
was my first girlfriend.
At 12?
Yes.
Okay.
And so I was brought into that world through her. And then the next year I acted.
How old was she?
She was 12 too.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to see if there was a theme.
No,
All right,
okay.
good.
So Eloise then the following year became my co-star in an adaptation of The Little Prince by Saint-Exupéry. I played the Little Prince, and she was my ephemeral flower.
Oh,
how romantic is that?
Great.
Yeah. Well, you put that with the kind of orgies we were having in the bathroom above. It's kind of like sweet and crazy, and it was a lot to be exposed to at a young age. But it was the theater, and it was where I fell in love with the theater and the idea of freedom and the idea of freedom of expression. And at that time, what those guys were doing, this is like really seriously 2 or 3 years after Stonewall riots. So what they were doing was living in their skin, proud to be in their skin, and shouting it. And that was what was really brilliant about it, was that I was exposed to that at such an early age.
And that was like 72, right?
Yeah.
And now your father, I imagine that the other gift you had was that you were brought up in a household which was relatively bohemian, I'm assuming. I mean, right?
Catholic bohemian.
Catholic bohemian.
Yeah.
So their heart was in the right place, and there was a limit to the bohemianism.
Yes.
Yeah. It was guilty bohemianism.
No bong hits in the living room.
Don't tell us if you do it. Tell the priest.
Yeah.
Were you brought up with a lot of religion?
I was an altar boy, and
Oh, boy,
and
yeah.
I escaped unscathed. I will say though that one priest brought us, the altar boys, on a field trip to Times Square, and brought us to see a movie,
Oh, yeah.
which was called Deliverance.
No.
And I was sitting there. I guess I was around 11 or 12.
Are you
11.
serious?
Yeah, I'm serious.
How?
And I was like a little shocked, and all I could think of in my head was that he must have thought that by the title of the film, Deliverance, that there must be some kind of religious theme going on here. But
You would hope that he thought that.
I would hope.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way: I came out with "Squeal Like a Pig,"
Yeah.
kind of just emblazoned on my
That's hilarious.
conscience.
That's hilarious. 'Cause I had the same experience with Deliverance. My grandparents took me to see that when I was 9.
Yeah.
Thinking, my parents said, take him to the movies. They took us to that. And I'd never seen my grandparents so uncomfortable for 2 hours. So the Catholicism thing, though, it wasn't leaned on, obviously. I mean, your father, were there other folk singers that hung out? I mean, how your father was playing guitar?
Well,
Did you see?
My father was a choir director, leading masses, and being his sense of what music should be to the church, which was actually a very cool thing. However,
What would that be, though? How would you describe that, what he thought music should be?
well, what he thought church music should be. So he brought a kind of a modern sensibility to it. And so there was a cross between that and his classical training as well. And he ran the choir, so he loved working with multiple voices and composed a lot of oratorios and pieces for choruses. 20th century choral music was where he really wound up, his passion wound up.
Wow.
And so it was a way, I guess, to receive an education. I'm not sure it was a great education. And when I was 11, 12, I took a test to get into one of 3 pilot public school high schools and got into Stuyvesant High School. And that was a big savior for me because it was an excellent education. However, when I got into this school, I was called down to the principal's office, and Sister Mary Roberts said, listen, I've got this letter here. You got into Stuyvesant High School. Are you aware that that school is primarily Jewish children?
And you said, I know, I want to get into show business.
I'm
Perfect preparation for my future.
Well, I was a little shocked actually, but there was it was an interesting time for the Catholic Church because there was that kind of nun, and there was also the Sister Helen Prejean kind of nun. And Sister Helen, many years later, when I was doing Dead Man Walking, explained to me. She said Vatican II liberated a lot of young women that were called to service to God. And it basically said, you can go out into your community, you have your own voice, you don't have to listen to what the priests say, you are your own person, go do the work of Jesus. And so it liberated a lot of young women. So the younger nuns I had were actually very cool. They were involved, and they were kind and compassionate and nurturing. It was the older nuns that were the ones with the rulers, and they were tough. I had one nun in 8th grade that, she was tiny. She was like, must have been 3 foot something. And whenever anything went wrong in the classroom, and she would ask who did it, and no one would, turn anyone in, she would line all the boys up in a line. She'd get on this stool she had. She'd take her ring hand and she'd whack us across the face. Back like, pow, pow. Okay, next. Wah, wah. So it was the corporal punishment from this little tiny woman we all could have crushed.
And I imagine after 2 guys, the guy at the end ratted everybody out, right?
Nope.
No?
No, we stayed strong.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good for you. Keep a secret. So out of Stuyvesant, what shifted into, how did you decide that, obviously this is the heart of your compassion and politics to a certain degree comes out of a lot of that experience you had as a kid. Mm-hmm. But when did you decide, I'm going to Los Angeles? What drove the decision to get involved in this mess?
Well, I was in I went to State University of New York at Plattsburgh for 2 years, which is about 20 miles from the Canadian border. And I went there because they were the only theater department that answered my letters. Them in Buffalo. And I didn't want to go to Buffalo because that was so much of a weird trip to go up and then left.
And it's cold, and it's Buffalo.
Very cold.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
Plattsburgh was cold too, but it was straight up.
Right.
So it seemed like an easier trip. Up 87.
I'm glad you based your decision about a college on a highway.
Well, I didn't want to miss the turn left, you know? Well, what if you
Lost
passed
in the hills.
Albany and just kept going, you know?
Well, you end up going to school in Canada.
But so I went there for 2 years. I got my grade point average up very high because I realized that my high school education was quite great, even though I didn't have a great average in high school. I was trained well enough to be able to take classes and get A's and everything. And so I transferred. I went out to Los Angeles with the hopes of transferring to UCLA. Came out here, worked for a year in a warehouse in Burbank as a Teamster, and earned enough money to put myself through college, but only because the state of California at that point still had residency meant you could go to college,
Right.
and you know, one of those
Affordable.
great progressive things that has since disappeared into the ether.
No more.
Well, it's you know, it's a shame, but and at UCLA I hit the ground running because I'd been working in a warehouse for a year and I was not going to go back there. I just didn't, it just felt like, okay, you have an opportunity now, you better make the most of it. And so I worked real hard and
In acting from the beginning. You knew that you wanted to be an actor.
director.
That was all directing.
I
at
acted
UCLA.
some, but I wanted to direct, and that's where I met the folks that would become the Actors Gang. We did a midnight show when I graduated at a place called the Pilot Theater in Hollywood, and we did an adaptation of this play called Ubu the King, which is a turn-of-the-century French surrealist play that is scatological and weird and fantastically disgusting. And it was just right for us at the time. We were, you know, I'm 20 years old and I'm a punk rocker, and
Sure.
this is what I wanted theater to be. And
I'll show them.
yeah, so we got in their face, and it was a big hit, and we ran for 6 months, and it was, you know, we found a lot of friends that way, you know, Los Angeles creative artists that came to find our show, and we developed relationships with.
Right, because New York has a sort of organic, or at the time you grew up, has sort of an organic kind of button-pushing, envelope-pushing art scene.
Yeah.
That is really no longer anywhere. And you were able to actually find that here.
Definitely.
Which is, like, to me, is surprising.
It was surprising. It was beautiful, actually. Between the punk rock and the performance art and the visual art and the experimental filmmakers that were working at the time, it was a really exciting time. And it's this 1981, 82. And so, you know, you had, you know, the band X, you had
Fear.
Fear,
I think the band
Circle
Fear.
Jerks.
Yeah.
You had oh, I was watching the other day, Wendy Williams from the Plasmatics. And
Right.
You had, it was just Jello Biafra coming down from San Francisco. So it was like a very creative time. And it was Reagan years, so there was a lot to be angry about.
Like to fight against. Yeah.
And so we took it. We took our roles as young artists in the theater seriously. We wanted to do things that reflected society. We wanted to shake it up, and we wanted to do rock and roll on stage. And it was the right time to do it. And I have to say, I'm not sure if we were in New York, we would have been supported the way we were, because you know. Our first play at midnight, a group right out of college, the Los Angeles Times came down, the Herald Examiner, the Weekly, the Reader, everyone came and saw us. They all reviewed it.
Something radical was happening.
Well, it wasn't, yes, they were very supportive, but the fact is they showed up.
Yeah, yeah.
And they don't do that now.
Yeah.
You know, even in Los Angeles, it's very difficult for a young theater company to get, well, forget the LA Times, to get the LA Weekly to come, or to list them, for God's sake.
Well, how much do you think had to do because of there was something to fight against? There was already a scene happening that seemed to be building up, you know, momentum and having a message and some rawness and some, you know, some real energy into it. I mean, how much do you think of that type of theater really exists now?
I think it's there. And I think, unfortunately, the delivery system has gotten a little corrupted. So it's very difficult. Like, for example, the LA Weekly does not do theater listings. They only list a select amount of things. When we were coming up, they listed everything.
Right.
So you could be found.
Right.
Now it's all, I think there's a reliance on the internet to be the delivery system.
Right. Sure. Post a YouTube video.
And so if you're savvy and coming out of college and you got a young theater company, maybe you can figure that out. But it would be nice if the people that are in charge of what culture is covered were a little more inclusive in the way they
and supportive.
Yeah.
And pushing it through.
Yeah, it helped me. It helped the Actors Gang become the group it became, and it's a shame that that there's not more coverage of the arts in the Los Angeles Times and the LA Weekly.
In talking about that, I've seen a couple of your recent plays, and in terms of the power of theater and getting people out to theater, what do you think has been lost outside of just people covering it? Do you think that theater is as vital now, or could be as vital now as it was when, say, you were coming up in the 80s?
I think it's even more vital. I think what we've seen happen with other forms is, for example, when I was coming up in the film industry, there were still mavericks running studios. There were still people that were a little crazy and had a bit of the gambler in them that would say to a young filmmaker, "Go ahead and make your film, kid, and take a chance," and not look at numbers and not look at like, how do we do this and not lose any money? Yeah. Which is essentially the game right now. Is like, how do you put together a project and make sure you're not paying anyone too much, so that when the bottom line is taken care of with pre-sales overseas and with DVD and satellite and all those sales. So you really had some great people making the decisions back then. So the 70s was still going to a certain extent. Sure. That idea, where that brief period of time that Peter Biskin writes about in his book.
Where the old guys didn't know what to do anymore, so they just gave the reins to the young dudes who had some balls.
Yeah. After Easy Rider, every studio goes, "Get us a long-haired filmmaker." Yeah. Apparently those long hairs know what they're doing.
Sure. I don't get it, but the kids like it.
Yeah. We made a lot of money.
Yeah.
Man, bring them in. I want some hippie directors. So kind of for a while there was a brief moment where creative, innovative voices were given the keys to the car.
So what made the shift for you to, like, how did you start to do films and why?
Well, let me finish
Sure.
First that what's happened over the course of the years is because that's becoming less and less of a reality, where there's more compromise being made as far as innovative voices, what kind of stories you tell, etc. Theater has become more vital because you can actually tell those stories in theater, because it's less of a gamble for some. It's a lot less expensive to do. So you can have in the kind of area that we work, the Actors Gang, we are able to do whatever we want to do because. You hear that? We're able to do what we want to do because we have a certain economic limitation on we're not working in $1 million of budget.
Right.
So and the same with music. I believe music still has innovative voices, and it's really great, as film does. But it's not a way you can really make a living, like it used to be. When I was coming up, there was a certain madness still in charge, and that madness allowed for innovative, creative people to be paid money and do things without 10 executives going through the script before you do it.
And ruining it.
Yeah.
Hey, this seems okay, but how can we make it worse?
Yeah.
Seems like it was probably a lot more fun.
It was. Yeah. It was a lot more fun.
When you have somebody who's like, "Do it, man," you're like, "All right."
Yeah, and all of a sudden you're getting paid to do some crazy shit, and you're like, wow, this is really cool. And I was very lucky, and you know, I caught the tail end of that, and I had the good fortune to work with Robert Altman 3 times on film.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, what a beautiful visionary he was, and he empowered me at a time in my career to go out and direct myself, and by taking me in as a collaborator on The Player, and really listening and valuing what I had to say, and we had, you know, a really special time with that movie and with the ones we did after that. And I miss him weekly. I think about him. It's a shame that there is not going to be another Robert Altman. I believe there's a lot of innovative filmmakers right now, and I'm excited by a lot of the work I'm seeing. I wish, though, that it wasn't so cutthroat to get a movie made. It's gotten so insulting in a lot of ways. And it's not just me. It's just across the board. When you have actors that are working their entire lives and building reputations and still getting paid scale in their 50s and 60s, it's insulting, and it's a shame, and it's a real travesty that exists. It used to be a business that took care of its own. It was a family business. It took care of its crews. It paid people well. And now it's gotten bottom line corporate mentality. Get somebody else. We don't want that guy if he's not going to work for scale. And it's terrible for the young actors too, because you got young actors coming up not able to really make a living doing it, because it used to be that you'd earn a certain level on your first job and you'd get what you call a quote. And
right.
A quote would increase as you got better. And so the more you delivered the goods, the more money you got paid. Now it's bottom line, they say, some memo went out in the 90s, late 90s, going, why the fuck are we paying these people so much?
Yeah, they'll do it for nothing.
They'll do it for nothing.
Yeah.
Or, you know, there's someone that'll work for scale.
Sure.
And there is.
Yep.
There is someone
Always.
who works for scale. I'm thinking, you know, it's funny because I've been in the nonprofit world for 32 years with the Actors Gang. It's starting to feel more and more like Hollywood's a nonprofit organization. It's like, you know, can you volunteer some time for our organization so that we can make a movie? You know, it's right. It's like pretty soon. I guarantee you, pretty soon, people are gonna be paying to be in movies. Like actors are gonna be like, I will pay $30,000 for that role. Yeah. And the filmmaker will be going, all right, a little more, a little more.
Talk to my agent. Let's get that number up. Yeah. Let's talk about Altman for a minute. Like Shortcuts and The Player. Like I see Shortcuts as like a classic, traditionally formed Altman movie. That it was long, it was conversational, it was lyrical. Where The Player was very tight, it seemed script-wise. Now, as somebody who had not directed a feature yet, I have to assume that you took. You know, he was sort of mentored to you in a lot of ways. So, what were some of the things you learned from Bob Altman that changed your vision of how you directed?
Well, it was perfect timing. The Player did it in the spring, and I was in the fall. I was going to do Bob Roberts, so I watched every moment. I absorbed everything, and there's many lessons I got from Bob. But I guess one of the main ones would be he had this idea of director as auteur. He was an auteur. But when people would come up to him and say, Bob, ask him a question, and he didn't know the answer, he would say, I don't know. Hey, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah.
And which immediately empowers the person, whether it's the lighting guy or whether it's the cameraman or the actor, it immediately empowers them. I think he knew what he really wanted, but I think what he was doing was he was creating a collective. He was saying, let's do this together. Let's fail together. Let's succeed together.
We certainly felt that with the actors in like Nashville, MASH, Shortcuts, any of those, McCabe and Mrs. Miller, that it almost felt like everyone was literally living together on set.
Yes.
And there was no distance.
Yes. The great thing about it was he took me aside when we started The Player and he says, listen, at some point, the producers are going to come to you and they're going to try to, I guarantee you, there's going to be some kind of little shit they're going to do, and it's going to be
plant some seed in your head.
Yeah. And he said, make a deal with me right now. We're doing this movie together. And if any one of that, if someone comes to you like that, or if someone comes to me like that, make a vow with me that we'll just tell them to fuck off. I said, okay, I'll do that with you. Because he had already done that for me. Because when they were putting together the finance for the player, they wanted some other actor to do it. My name wasn't enough. And he'd already made a promise to me. And so he said, well, fuck you, I already made a promise to him. I'm doing it with him, and that's it. And he had to wait an extra 3 months to get the financing because of that. But he was loyal to me. And so I was like, I'm totally there for you. So
did it happen?
Oh, yeah. Of course it happened. Because there's always going to be someone that's trying to get you to play you against the other guy for it's this stupid power struggle that happens all the time. Happens in relationships, too. It's the kind of thing where, can I, wheedle in and get your trust, and hey, Bob's a crazy guy, all this.
It's funny because you were playing one of those guys.
Yeah.
They're actually giving you little bits of information to integrate into your character.
Yeah.
Oh, that's how you be a scumbag.
Yeah. And it's great because I had two great, crusty, kick-ass mentors, Bob Altman and when I did Bob Roberts, Gore Vidal. And it was both of whom would suffer no fools, and I think Gore put it, and would try to make fools suffer.
Yeah.
And those it was like I had two extra dads that were saying, "We believe in you, kid. You can do this. You're smart. You got courage. You can do this."
So did Gore sort of help sharpen your satirical knife when it came to dealing with politics and the way that you dealt with Bob Roberts?
Well, yes, to a degree. I had already written the script, and
Right.
I had sent it to him to play Brickley Paste in the movie, to the senator that was going to lose. And but what he gave me, first of all, was the fact that he said yes was a validation of what I was trying to do. I think the fact that he got it, that Gore Vidal got what I was about to try with my first film, and I hadn't been proven as a filmmaker or a writer at that point. So it was a big shot in the arm. But the other thing was that it was what he brought to it that taught me so much was the sophistication of what we were dealing with. He took it to another level. Like when what we did was, despite the fact that we were, on a very tight budget, we set up a situation where he was. I said to my production designer, "Get me a desk, get me something that looks behind." And on one of our locations, we're on with Gore. We got to film him at his desk, and we got to be talking to him after he's lost the election, and let him go. Let Gore be Gore. And so we just turned the camera on, and he just was brilliant in how he talked about America, about democracy, about what it takes to be to get elected and stay in office, the amount of fundraising all that does. His beautiful metaphor about the frogs in the pot of water, and if you put them in from the start, they're never going to notice that they're dead. But if you put them into a hot thing, they'll jump right out. That whole idea of what it is to be sucked into the system, and all that was all from Gore taking his gift to the film and to me to really give it a certain gravitas that it might have lacked.
He just riffed it?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And he did it, and it's beautifully acted too, because Gore did run for Congress.
Yeah.
And he was defeated. And his family, the whole history, the whole tradition, he should have been a congressman. He should have been a senator. He was gay. So it was way before it was going to be happening. So that frustration or that calling, the calling to service was kind of kept from him.
Stifled.
Yeah, and so when you see that scene in Bob Roberts, it's kind of beautiful, and that he allows himself to go into the tragic of that, and it's quite a moving piece of film.
Do you feel like Bob Roberts, now when you look back on it, there's a certain prophecy to it, that it seems that the right has appropriated a sort of kind of grassrootsy, almost like populist, groovy kind of approach to some of their candidates, and more aggressively with the Tea Party, but they did appropriate some of the models of lefty activism in order to sort of gained momentum recently. Did you feel like, like, oh my God, this is Bob Roberts?
Goebbels did it, I think, too.
Right. He didn't play guitar. That has been around, misleading the angry and poor into voting against their economic self-interest.
Yeah, and taking the hip and making a cool film to, with Leni Riefenstahl,
Sure.
You use culture to make your brand hip.
Yeah.
Whether Tide or Nazism, whatever. It's just, it's...
Same thing, Tim. Yeah. Let her enjoy it. Okay. Don't have to rush things here. So it seems, as I talked, that acting is secondary to your heart.
Yeah.
And you're so damn good at it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
It's interesting because as I was going over your resume, that you've really done like 2 or 3 movies a year for almost 20 years now.
Not recently, but yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were, and you evolved as an actor. You became better and better at it. You can do comedy, you can do drama, and you can sacrifice a certain bits of yourself to really engage in a part. And there's I find that there's a real difference between what people see as movie stars and people who are just great fucking actors. Do you see that difference?
Yeah, it's in the amount of money you're paid.
Really?
Yeah, pretty much.
But you don't seem to be a guy that sort of you never found, you didn't exploit a particular quirk or trait to sort of repeat over and over again in order to make that money. You obviously made some decision to not really repeat yourself and to challenge yourself as an actor.
From the start, because what you say, what's the word, broke, when I got famous, was really Bull Durham. And it was, I got so many scripts after that to play the dumb guy,
the doofus. He's a funny doofus.
He's a funny doofus type.
Yeah.
Let's cast the funny doofus from Bull Durham. Let's get him to do that again. And of course, as an actor, I always thought, well, the whole point of it was to be someone different every time, and so I started looking for stuff that was a little weirder or a little more challenging, and I think I've pretty much been able to do that over the course of the years. Never repeat, and that's I think though if. What the idea of what a movie star is the idea of someone that has a certain brand, and there's nothing wrong with this, by the way. It generates the whole machinery of the industry.
Right.
But it's when someone is a certain kind of actor and they keep doing that kind of acting, and so your audience knows what it's going to get. It's like the brand.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's just not something that really interested me, and I got nothing to complain about. I'm very happy where I am. It's just that kind of career, I think, would have made me unhappy, and I probably have a gate around where I live, and several people that are waiting there to tackle people, and
so you're happy you don't need that.
And someone to ask me what you just asked.
Mr. Roberts wants to know what you just said.
Yeah, no, I don't need that. What? Yeah, okay.
So
but one thing I did when I moved out to LA, and it was like a huge, beautiful liberation, was I had an assistant in New York. I kept him on for a year because the economy was so bad, but I didn't really need him anymore. And so I wound up getting rid of my assistant. I would get rid of pretty much as I could, of peripheral people.
You wanted to disappear a little bit?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to just take a step back and be more contemplative and not have people to answer to.
Uh-huh.
And, as much as you might think an assistant might help you organize your life, you also have to deal with a personality. Constantly. And so I just wanted to kind of be alone. And so I got rid of the assistant. I started doing all my own chores and and
Like what, Tim? What are we talking?
everything.
Like
Everything.
what had gotten away from you?
Well, listen.
exactly?
Okay. What did he say? What had gotten away from me? Well, I'll tell you something. I'm very fortunate. I've been blessed. And when I was in New York, raising my family, we had help.
Sure.
We had someone that, and so maybe I didn't make my bed for 10 years.
Maybe.
And maybe I make my bed every day now. So,
Good for you.
see? Yeah, little Timmy can make his own bed now. And little Timmy does his own fucking laundry.
Oh,
So, you know what? It actually feels great.
good.
And I don't want a pat on the back for that. I don't think there's anything special about that. But I have to say...
We do.
No. Basically, you know what? What happens is you get a certain amount of attention, wealth, fame, notoriety, whatever, and the tendency is to separate. When you separate, it can actually be quite detrimental. And as much as you think it's comfortable or more comfortable, it actually is costing you something.
It's isolating.
Well, it's making you the kind of person that doesn't make their fucking bed. Seriously.
And can't understand people who do.
Right. And so ultimately, as much as that's not a special thing, it was something that was a necessity for me, and it's something that made me actually a lot happier, was the idea that, this is it's stupid to talk about for too much longer, but it's essentially just, it's the idea that I think there was a period of time in my life where I just kind of, because I tended to not live in the world I should have been living in.
Among people who were just having regular
No,
lives.
I always lived amongst the hoi polloi, Mark. I never had an entourage. I didn't separate myself from people that way. I'm just talking about me and just taking care of my own stuff.
With the shift in your life and this decision to sort of, kind of get a little more in touch with yourself and do your own chores and stuff. I mean, did you feel like you needed some sort of humility around this stuff? I mean, how do you feel different?
Again, it's no big deal, but
It is.
It is not a big deal. Who the fuck cares?
Well, it's important to you, and this is about you.
Well, no, well, yeah, but
Come
whatever.
on, Tim.
Whatever. I planted a garden.
What'd you
Someone
plant?
comes and takes care of it, though. I planted kale everywhere. I want to talk to the CEO about
Whole Foods?
my product line. No, it's just, it's stupid.
No, it's great. These things make a big difference. And to make a choice like that at the level you're at is not a small thing. Because you felt like you had some distance from your heart and you wanted to reconnect with simple things. That's a beautiful thing. That's an evolution.
Well, thank you for interpreting it that way. And
Look, dude, I'm just trying to make you look good.
Well, one of the things that I really like is simplicity, and I've always liked simplicity. And fame is a weird thing, and it complicates your life in a lot of ways, and sometimes it can kind of take you away from what you are in your heart. And this was an opportunity moving out here, because no one knew I was here, to kind of disappear for a while and not be famous for a while, and just sit and in my garden and read and ride my bike, and essentially for about 2.5, 3 years, that was my life. And I would have a beautiful creative outlet at the Actors Gang, which is 5 miles from my house. And so I'd either ride my bike or drive to the Actors Gang. But that was really my only contact with other people.
And the last play you did was, which one was it?
It's called Break the Whip.
Yeah, I saw that with you. You asked me to go to that. It was a spectacular play. And it was so layered and so interesting, and it was staged with elements of commedia dell'arte and like almost shadow puppets, and there was a lot of movement. It was I hadn't been to a play in a long time because quite frankly I've really got to be. It's got to come well recommended because I just can't put myself through some of them.
I know the feeling.
Yeah. but after I saw that, I was like, holy shit. Robbins is kicking ass. Yeah, and I went home. I was worked up about it, and it was an amazing piece of work.
Thank you.
Where is it?
Where is it?
Yeah. How come it didn't have a big long run?
22 actors, 3 musicians. It's not any economic model for theater right now. Things tend to be very small casts, but it's not over yet. We were just talking yesterday. There's a festival that we went to this past year down in Bogota in Colombia. Bogota! It's a beautiful festival down there for theater companies from all around the world, and Actors Gang went down there with 1984, which we've been doing all over the world. That was our 5th continent that we've been to with the Actors Gang with 1984, and 2 of the cast members or 3 cast members from '84 are here. We have like several different casts. Yeah, give them applause. And so we were just talking yesterday about bringing Break the Whip down there in 2014. So the way we look at the theater that we do, generally in equity waiver or off-Broadway theater, you do one shot and you're over. And we've been thinking more like a repertory company lately. So we figure when we do a play, we're going to do it again and again and again. And so we just finished a limited run of Molière's Tartuffe, which is about to go on the road. And that's about the 3rd or 4th time that's been done. And so we believe that every time you bring a play back, it gets more interesting, and the actors are able to go to a different level with it. And '84 we've been doing for 6.5, 7 years now.
Amazing. There's a lot of things we can talk about. But I want to talk about the prison program that Colette brought up, but I also want to talk about the 2 other movies you directed, Dead Man Walking and The Cradle Will Rock. Now, because these they're socially issues, but they're political issues as well. And when you did Dead Man Walking, I started to think about something odd on the way over here. That I was thinking about the movie and the character of Sean Penn and the character of the other murderer, the really bad guy.
Right.
And I thought, could that movie have worked if that guy was the main character? Mm-hmm. And that, in choosing Sean and how he was receptive, to opening his heart a bit. I don't know what the question I'm trying to ask is really, but But I do this. But what motivated the decision to take on that issue and to make that your first big movie like that?
We actually took the worst possible person. I mean, he was guilty. He was a racist. He was an awful person. And in the book, there's 2 different murderers. There's one that could very well have been innocent, and we chose to avoid doing that one. We wanted to really ask the question, even if he is guilty, can you, as an audience member, sanction the taking of a life? There was a lot of discussion about that when we were editing the film, because when Sean's character is executed, I chose to cut back to the murder and to remind the audience of what the crime was. And there was a lot of controversy about that. There were some people that felt that we shouldn't do that because at that point they say, you've got the audience, they're with Sean's character, why do you want to remind? I said, well, because it's the truth, and you have to make this a difficult thing. It shouldn't be propaganda. It shouldn't be you manipulate the audience into liking a character and then they feel bad that you should really, the moral question really should be difficult.
Right.
And so I think because we took that road, the movie has had a tremendous life to it. I think that if we had done it the other way, we would have won the evening, but it would have been forgotten.
Because it continues to live with that moral challenge to every audience.
Yes, and in fact, what we've done, Sister Helen, a couple of years after the movie came out, there was an opera that was done of Dead Man Walking, and she said, well, do you want to do a play of it? And so I wrote a stage adaptation for Dead Man Walking. And we had this thing in New York with a bunch of actors, and we did a read-through of it. And we were talking about whether we should do a Broadway show, and there was interest, and it would have been a lucrative venture. But I thought, well, you know what? I don't want to direct this again because I think I've gotten the most extraordinary performances you can ever get from those two characters, from Susan and Sean. I mean, it was like, in my mind, was the perfection what they did. And I didn't want to go creatively there again. I didn't want to have to direct two new actors in that way. So what I decided to do was we decided to go the opposite route. Usually when a play hits on Broadway, it goes to regional, then it goes to community theaters, and then it goes to universities. So we decided to go from the other direction. So for the last 12 years, we've been offering it to universities throughout the United States, to theater departments, and in order to get the rights, the universities have to convince two other departments within the university to offer courses in the death penalty using Sister Helen Prejean's book, Dead Man Walking, as part of the syllabus. And we've been able to do that so far in over 150 universities throughout the United States. So, so what happens every time the theater department performs the play, there's a whole bunch of activity that happens from the different departments regarding symposiums, discussions, guest lecturers, debates, art exhibits, music. You know, it's kind of become this kind of...
What's supposed to happen in universities is happening around
Yes,
this thing.
yes. And so they collectively come together and discuss an issue. And I've made it very clear that in the adaptation that the same thing should apply, that it shouldn't be one-sided. We've got to give great and deep respect to the murder victims' families, to these families, and their loss has to be really played honestly. And what happens is we engage these students in an emotional journey, and they have to go there emotionally in order to make this story work. And we're finding that it had a real profound effect on the debate, and it's really starting to shift things in a profound way.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Congratulations. When she introduced you and she talked about that prison program, and you think about how change happens because of theater, because of art, it's really how you're doing. It's almost on an intimate grassroots level that, you know, if you can change a small group of people and sort of have them challenged and rethink something important in a moral way, that will carry their life. That will be carried out. That message will live with them, and they will share that message. And then when I watch like The Cradle Will Rock, it's a huge movie, and it seemed to me on some level that there was a nostalgia for when art like really shook up a country. Mm-hmm. And you know, in seeing the work that you're doing, even in that play I saw, where you're dealing with race, you're dealing with politics, you're dealing with, you know, tyranny and a lot of different things. And indigenous peoples are a broad canvas, but it's very intimate. That do you feel that art still has the power to mobilize on as big a level as what was happening in Cradle Will Rock? That it is that big of a threat anymore, and it still can have that much juice? I
think it's got an enormous potential to shift paradigms. Really, and you know, it's the great thing about it is sometimes you don't know it until much later. Like, I can still remember things I experienced when I was 12, 13 years old that shifted my paradigm, you know.
The Coquettes.
The Coquettes, seeing Shakespeare in the Park for the first time, seeing an Andrei Serban production, seeing Agamemnon when I was 14 years old. These things are, and it's usually a live event, by the way. Movies can be very moving and can stir great social change, no doubt about that, but they can also be pacifiers and anesthetizing. But theater can really shake things up and really change the way you look at life, really. And so I do believe that. I believe that it's what makes it all worth it, and it's what makes the struggle worth it. And I'm really gratified and fortunate to be with a group of artists at the Actors Gang that get that and believe in that and want to do that and are in it for that. We are, I believe, unique in that way because I have a bunch of actors that, yes, they all want to work in TV and movies, and yes, they would like to make a decent living in that realm, but they also love theater, and they love what true theater is. And they don't view theater as an audition piece for getting a part in a movie or a TV show. And so, you know, it's like I have a place to go that's like a laboratory where I can work on my ideas in a common vocabulary with people, and we can make something happen that's, you know, when it works, it can be magical.
Well, to sort of close out the conversation with, tell me about the beginning of this prison program you're doing and what that is. That sounds fascinating.
About 7 years ago, a woman named Sabra Williams, who's a member of the company, came to me and she said, I would like to do this prison project that I did over in the UK when I lived there. And I was really into the idea, and I gave her some seed money to do it. And she started this program with some other actors. Essentially what we do, and I became a participant as a teacher a couple years after that, what we do is we go into prisons and we do 8 weeks of a workshop with about 20 to 25 incarcerated men. We've worked with women in the past, but haven't for the past 3 or 4 years. We do want to in the future, but the logistics are so difficult. That's a whole other conversation. It's difficult for men too. So, but we go to a prison called Norco, and we work for the 5-hour sessions. For 8 weeks straight, once a week, and we take them through a process that essentially is, well, it's based in the commedia. We get them to learn the stock characters of the commedia, because we don't want to be dealing with their story.
Right.
We want them to be playing a story. And
how many characters are there? 11 or how many?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And so they have to pick an archetype or one of the stock characters. And they're taught the basics of our style. One of the very first rule that we have in all of our workshops is you must respect the other actor. No touching. No, you don't, in a moment of passion, grab someone.
Or hit them or stab them.
Or hit them or stab them.
Right.
Or kiss them or embrace them or grab their butt.
Boundaries.
Yeah. But that's sacrosanct. You cannot, if that happens, you're off. You're out. You don't touch.
You go to theater jail.
You go to theater jail. You come sit. So that said, they start these improvs, and so one character will enter, and the one character will be angry, and another character will come on, and they'll be angry, and they'll say, "Guys, there's no scene here. You know, there's no scene. It's just two angry people. It's not interesting. It'd be interesting if you could fight, but you can't fight, so pick a different state of emotion
Right.
in response to anger."
Yeah.
And so they pick fear, which they've never been able to show in a prison before, to confrontation. So they're allowed to show fear. Huh. Or they respond with laughter to a threat. Uh-huh. Or, and this is the most evolved, they respond with sadness to a threat. Now that is empathy. And that's where it starts to get really interesting.
And so what happens is, essentially, in working over this 8-week period, we are repatterning them to respond differently to aggression. We're basically giving them the tools to avoid confrontation, because that's what got them in there in the first place. And if they're going to get out, by the way, they are getting out, folks. And they're going to be in your neighborhood. So you should support this kind of program, and we should have this program throughout the state. But, thank you. But essentially what it does is it allows them to start expressing emotion, and it allows them to think differently about what happens when someone gets in their face in the yard. And they tell us stories like, some guy got in my face 2 months ago, I would have hit him, I would have gotten a discipline, would have added more time to my sentence. But I looked at this guy, and he looked like the Capitano from the improv, and I started laughing. He said, he looked like a fool to me. And so he starts telling me, he started laughing at the guy. The guy got out of his way, no fight. Later in the yard, the guy looks at him, he goes, nice work. Like that. Gave him respect for avoiding the confrontation.
That's amazing.
Now, when we started this, in this Norco in particular, 4 years ago, it was really hard to get people to sign up for this thing. And it was like, oh, they're the weirdos, you know. It was a theater, oh yeah, go ahead, you know.
It's just like high school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. The last session we did, out of 600 inmates, 200 signed up. That's 1/3 of the prison is now into the idea of this rehabilitation. So the whole culture of the prison changed by this one program. It has direct results, and something that, by the way, is incredibly inspiring. When I'm driving back from that place, I feel better than I ever feel, because, you know, the great secret, by the way, of volunteering is that you get more out of it than the people you volunteer for do. Right. It's true. It winds up feeding my spirit much more than any situation I could have gone to in Hollywood would do. It's something that is inspiring for me. I look at these guys throwing down, putting white face on, pretending to be other people. I see a group of 25 badasses, some of them murderers, playing freeze tag, giggling like 6-year-olds, and I think, wow, this is complicated. This is pretty interesting. You know, all those prejudgments you have going in, all the fear you have going in, you at the end of the day you realize, there but for the grace of God go I. These guys made bad decisions. They fucked up. But as Sister Helen said to me, every man is worth more than their worst hour.
That's an amazing way to go out. Tim Robbins, ladies and gentlemen.
I wonder if you have some suggestion for me for bringing theater play and film script about lunaception. It seems to be the time for it, and I understand that you wrote something about birth control and lunaception, and with the war on women, it seems to be the perfect time for it. I have a play about a young midwife. Could you give me some suggestion of how to bring that into Hollywood?
What?
Lunaception. Birth by the moon.
Oh.
You know, Tim. That.
I gotta say, I'm speechless. I'm gonna think on that.
You want me to Google it?
Because for part of me is going, is it like conception by the moon? Because that was even more interesting. But birth by the moon.
Actually about birth control, and there is natural birth control in the woman, which has been lost in the world, and with the population growth.
Oh, I know what you're
and
talking
what's
about
going
now.
on.
Yes. Okay.
I think they call it the rhythm method
Yes.
from where
yes,
you come
yeah,
from.
yeah. But Catholics don't care about the moon, by the way.
No, that's witchcraft.
No, that's witchcraft. Yeah, it's an interesting idea. I don't know what to say though. It's hard for me because when I have like things that I'm trying to put together, movies and stories, and it's so overwhelming to even get my own shit done that all I can say is good luck and kick ass with it. If it's your passion, write it and tell that story.
Hi, my question's about the Shawshank Redemption. So it's one of my favorite movies. I imagine most people here, it's one of their favorite movies. My friends who are movie snobs, they can't help but admit it's one of their favorite movies. Every time it's on TV, and it's on TV a lot, I find myself absorbed in the story and watching it over and over. So I'm just wondering, here's the question, sorry. Is when you received the script, when you read through it, when you started to make it, and even when you saw it afterwards, did you realize it was going to be one of the greatest sort of long-lasting, important movies
The greatest movie.
that we all love?
That's funny because it's always battling The Godfather with 1 and 2. What month? Yeah. So, well, thank you very much. No, I didn't know it was going to be the classic it's become. It was an amazing script. It was the best script I've ever read. And it was, he did an amazing adaptation. So I was very excited by that. But when we were filming it, we had no idea it was going to be that great.
Out of all your many accomplishments, what is success to you?
What is success? Waking up in the morning.
And making your bed.
You gotta aim low. If you can claim a success at 8:30 in the morning, when your bed is made, the rest of the day is candy. Success is really ultimately is for me is how my children are doing.
I was just wondering, what advice do you have for young actors in terms of trying to break into the bit, but also keeping your humanity and remaining an artist?
Well, find a way to keep your passion for it. Even success, by the way, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to keep your passion. In fact, sometimes when you start earning a living at it, it's with material that might not be that exciting.
Really? In
to
show
you.
business?
Yeah. It's a funny thing, isn't it? So I would say that there's got to be other things, whether it's a theater company or whether it's a passion for art or music, or whether it's a volunteerism, working, tutoring kids, or there's got to be something else than acting. People that are exclusive to acting and think that their happiness is going to come from it, I wish you the best of luck, but I would suggest that there's other things that bring joy in life than scoring a miniseries. It's because there are people that I know that are not that successful, that are content and good people and happy people and blessed people, and there are people that I know that are quite successful that are not so great and a little tortured. And so the formula isn't that cut and dried. You know what I mean?
Hi. I think firstly it's a privilege to be in conversation with you, and I consider myself very happy and lucky. And I'm a film student at USC, and I'm from India. I must quickly add this, that back in India, you have a huge fan following, and all my friends, whenever we meet up, I mean, Shawshank Redemption is a huge, huge thing. And to quickly put in my question, I just want to know, do you think the directors as of today are lacking something, or what do you think works for a good director? What are the three possible things that you think makes a good director?
Well, there's so many good ones. There's so many good directors right now. I would say it's the courage to tell a story. I think what makes a director special for me is the courage to tell a story that has a happy ending. It's okay to inspire people at the end of a movie. It's been a long time since I've been interested in nihilism or nihilism or however you pronounce that. How do you pronounce that?
It's just sadness.
Sad. Yeah, I mean, it's an easy story to tell where, everything sucks at the end, It doesn't make you an artist. What's truly hard is to figure out a way to get to a redemptive ending and earn it. Not manipulate it, but earn it. Earn it in a genuine way where your audience is feeling better at the end of the movie. I think that's a good thing and a good thing to aspire to. One of my favorite movies this year is Silver Linings Playbook.
Great.
If you had told me, and people that haven't seen that movie, earmuffs?
Silver Lining Playbook.
Well, I'll just say it generically. If you had told me at the beginning of the movie how that movie ended, I would have said, I'm not going to like it. But he got there, and he got there in a beautiful way.
Yeah, I didn't even know it was a romantic comedy for a half hour.
Yeah.
I was wondering, a couple years ago during the 2010 election cycle, I mean this in a good-natured way completely, but it came out that there was a lot of mystery about that you donated money to a few people like Bachman, and people always wondered, was that like a prank, or was that, or what was the story behind that, if you don't mind me asking? It's your business, obviously, but just wondering.
Honestly, I actually didn't remember doing it, and then I went back. I said to my accountant, I said, did I do that? And he sent me the checks, and they were in my handwriting. I'm like, what? How could I have done that? And so I started looking, and there was an article that was written about people that were on the Republicans that were progressive, and I said, it must have been for that. I didn't give much money, and.
What article?
Yeah, it was weird. I don't know.
Just like some weird internet link? Oh my God.
It was actually, I actually had the thought for a second that it was like one of those like paranoid thrillers from the 70s where someone like hypnotizes you and you're like,
You had a
writing a check.
a parallax view. Yeah, you're a Manchurian candidate writing checks to the worst Republicans ever.
And so I gotta say, I still don't know, and I'm like, I'm ashamed by it. I wrote and I asked for my money back, but no one gave it. So
This is one of those moments where the quote from the sister that you ended with really applies. That you don't judge a man on
his worst hour.
a check to Michelle
Well,
Bachmann.
one thing I will say though is that I'm really sick of divisiveness, and I really, I have been all over this country, and I was vilified during the Gulf War for, this stupid assumption that maybe we should, find the weapons of mass destruction before we invade a country. How naive I was, because when I saw all those people dancing for freedom in Baghdad and still are today, I'm being ironic and sarcastic. My point is...
But they pulled the statue down, Tim. You didn't see it? All right.
No, it wasn't a staged event.
No, not at all.
No, I did a play called Embedded, which we took around the world, and I was so pissed off, but here's the thing that got me, is that even though Fox News and other outlets tried to vilify me, tried to make me, call me a Saddam supporter, terrorist supporter. It got so absurd that I went to that Hasty Pudding Award in Harvard, and they did this skit, and it was so funny, and it was the future leaders of America in drag, in these big platform shoes and wigs, and they had these little signs with titles of my bad movies on them, and they said, no more bad movies, no more bad movies. It was a skit they did, and I'm improvising on stage with some Harvard students, and the next day the AP sends out a headline saying Tim Robbins' Hasty Pudding Award interrupted by protesters. Now, with no sense of irony and no sense of context either, basically putting out the message to hundreds of newspapers that I can't go anywhere because people are so pissed off at me because of my opposition to the war. Yeah. And in fact, the opposite was true. Whenever I went on Harvard that day, I was thanked by students. People, everywhere I went in the country, people were thanking me. Even Republicans were thanking me, saying, even those that disagreed with me said, God bless you for saying what you said because it shows we're living in a free country. And so I got the experience of that. I got the experience of Clint Eastwood having my back. I got the experience of Jack Valenti, a conservative Democrat, got my back on that situation. I don't vilify all Republicans. I don't believe all Republicans are evil. I believe that there are a lot of decent people that think differently than I do.
There are a couple, yeah.
And as crazy and twisted as some of the more radical Republicans are, and the more that they take over the party, I say, go ahead, because those Republicans that are decent people that want the same thing as all of us want are going to come over to our side. They're not going to stay with the crazies. So but it's very difficult for someone with pride, any person, to come over to your side if you're constantly calling him evil. It's not going to happen, folks. And so the sooner we get to the idea that we have more in common than we think, the sooner that I realize that we can have a drink with these people and have a laugh, the sooner we're going to get around to real change. I think where we're at right now is the entertainment of divisiveness, where we have different sides represented on different networks, and they're constantly at each other's throats. And what do you get from that? High ratings and a divided public. You know what? A divided public is very good for those that really want to keep power, because a divided public means they won't unite behind simple issues like we want clean air, we want clean water. As long as you're keeping those people divided, they're not going to get enough force and power to really change things. And so I'm always looking for a common ground. And so that wasn't, by the way, why that happened. That's just weird. And
that was a long way to go to deny something, Tim.
I'm denying it, but I'm not denying it at all. I'm saying I was in a, what is it called?
State.
Manchurian moment?
Right. So the word evil is out. Can we still use the word wrong?
Oh, yeah. But you know what? Yes, yes, absolutely.
Okay, good.
But I don't want to bash everybody.
Sure.
I want to believe that some people have some sense and reason. And I'm very hopeful right now.
You should bring that theater thing with the Commedia dell'arte to the Republican side and have them do some of the role playing and do characters. Just get a few of them. Maybe you could get like 10 of them to, you know.
I don't want to.
Lindsey Graham and Boehner would be great. Maybe Lindsey could do drag for the first time. I think that would.
He'd find his inner voice.
I'd say so.
Beautiful.
It's not that well hidden.
There's so many acting methods that are being taught these days. It can get really confusing. I've never pursued acting career, but I've always been fascinated by acting as a means to get out of my head. Is there any method that you believe in? What would be an advice for young actors in that regard? Because it may get confusing.
Well, we have a method that we work in at the Actors Gang, and it's too long. I don't want to. It'll take too long to really explain it properly, but its basis is sincerity and truth. But one thing we encourage is taking bold chances and living finding the extraordinary and having the courage to do that. I think what I don't like in acting is safety, where people, and you see it a lot with a lot of young actors right now, is they're not really making a choice of any emotion. It's just more like a little mumbly attitude thing. And for me, I just want to smack them because, you know, we grew up with great models of, you know, actors coming out of the method school and Stanislavski, and, you know, we had the Brando and, you know, Dustin Hoffman and, you know, Pacino and De Niro, and they were taking risks, and they were making bold choices, and I don't like it when I see young actors getting by on just attitude. I think attitude is not enough, and the reason I think people do that is because sometimes when you take a chance to play an emotion strongly, you might fail, you might look kind of silly, and I'd rather work that way. I'd rather make the bold choices and fail in order to learn how to be a better actor than just constantly be even keel and just full of attitude. So we have a real rigorous method at the Actors Gang, and it's tough, and we're still training. I'm still training after 32 years, and it's something that I love. It's a style of theater that is exciting, but you know, I can't get into it too much here.
Hello, Mr. Robbins.
Yeah.
Do you collect anything, whether it be art or do you collect anything from your movies that you've, like memorabilia or things that have been close and personal to you throughout your career, or just that you've picked up?
That's kind of a stalkery question.
I know.
But a good question.
I feel kind of violated. I collect. I don't really collect anything. I had a baseball card period.
Recently?
2 periods. One, when I was a child, and somehow those all disappeared.
Sure.
And then when my kids were young, I collected cards with them. And that's about it. Yeah. I want to say something degenerate, but I don't want to.
5 corners.
What happened to 5 Corners? Yeah. It exists on DVD. Good.
Okay.
Tell a friend. Get it on television. It's a good movie.
Okay. Tim, one question. In the movie Catch a Fire, you play Nick Voss. And I just wanted to know what attracted you to that role. It was, I think, one of the few roles that brought you outside the US. You represent a pretty nasty representative of a nasty regime. So, and the ending is also still somewhat unclear to me. I've seen the movie only once, back in 2006, but I just wanted to know what went through your mind to accept this role in the first place.
Well, I thought the script was great. For those of you who don't know, it's about South Africa and apartheid, and I play a person that was one of the people of the police force there that tortured people, and I play a torturer, essentially. And I thought it was an important story to tell. It was it's myself and sorry?
No, I didn't say anything.
I thought I was hearing voices.
Well, why don't you tell us what they're saying, Tim? This is your moment.
It was myself and Derek Luke, and he plays, and here's why a lot of people didn't see it, he plays a terrorist. What they would call, what my character would have called a terrorist at the time in South Africa. People that were in the ANC were labeled that way. And so it tells us a story about apartheid that I thought was a necessary story. I wasn't the good guy in it, but I don't. That doesn't matter to me. I think it's okay to play villains if
You're good at that, man.
Story. Thank you. Yeah, I like playing that. It was fun.
Arlington Road, man, yeah. Shit, that was good.
Yeah.
That is one where Jeff Bridges gets the rod.
I blowed shit up.
Yeah.
Hi, so I actually have a question about Lunaception as well. I'm just kidding. So you seem to be really into like the raw, organic, like live theater aspect of what's going on. How do you feel about the internet? Do you think it makes it easier for people to make good art or more difficult? Does it hide the good art or help it get discovered?
I have to be optimistic and say that I have all hope and faith that it will expand horizons as it continues to develop the internet. I would like to see it stop stealing so much, but maybe the game is already up on that. So I don't know. It's interesting because young musical artists right now have to take a different path, and it's like the movie industry where you used to nurture talent and used to take a gamble. Well, they used to nurture talent in the music industry, and now you could do one album and you're done if you don't hit.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to see the internet take on that role of nurturing. That would be awesome if it was able to recognize that it's part of the development of a band, that it's part of the development of an artist, that it's not, you can maybe download their music, but you have to keep them alive if you like them. So I don't know where that paradigm shifts and how it happens. I have no idea. But it seems to me that that's a necessary part of the relationship between artist and consumer, that the consumer has to take more responsibility in the longevity of the artist.
But the internet is free, man.
Yeah, so is your
I know.
$2,000 computer, right?
Yeah.
I am a music and cinema student. I always, gave the reason that I was too afraid to go into politics because I didn't think that it would be able to create the change that I would want to happen. I'm, an artist, you could say. How politicians are mired in divisiveness, as you said earlier. So do you think maybe art has a bigger opportunity and bigger ability to make change?
Well,
those are the only two choices?
Oh, well, it's complicated because the Actors Gang just received a great grant from a government entity that's going to allow us to educate middle school children for the next 5 years. So we created that out of our art, but it was government that's going to facilitate the education. So it's a complicated thing. I would say that if you're going to take a political path, keep the soul of an artist. And if you're going to be an artist, be as relentlessly ambitious as a politician.
Write that shit down.
Thank you very much.